the trader you become. A re-entry is a new trade. One good trade can quietly turn into a series of re-entries. A trader catches the right directional move. The trade begins working, profit starts building. And as that profit grows, something can begin to change. The trader becomes more protective of it. The stop gets tightened, perhaps too quickly. Normal price movement takes the trader out. But then, price continues in the original direction. So the trader re-enters. The new position begins working, and the trader doesn't want to get stopped out again. Or perhaps the trader doesn't want the new position to take away the profit that was already made. So the stop gets managed differently. Maybe it moves to break even too quickly. Maybe it gets placed too close to price. Maybe it gets widened because the previous stop felt too tight. And without realizing it, the previous trade has started influencing how the new trade is being managed. This is where an important distinction can easily disappear. A re-entry may happen in the same market, during the same move, sometimes only moments after the previous position was closed, but it is still a new trade. And perhaps learning to treat it that way can change far more than just the entry. It can change the stop, the risk, the management, and the emotional decisions that follow. Chapter 1. Protecting profit can create more trading. Protecting profit sounds like good trading. And of course, protecting capital and managing risk matter. But there is a difference between managing risk according to a predefined process and trying to protect every piece of unrealized profit. Imagine a trader participating in a strong directional move. The position is profitable. A large candle begins forming. The trader knows the move cannot continue forever. So instead of continuing with the original management process, the stop gets tightened. The goal seems reasonable. Protect more of the profit. But the candle is still forming. Price moves back. A wick develops. The stop is hit. And then, price continues in the original direction. Now the trader sees the move continuing, without the position. So the trader re-enters. But something has changed. The trader remembers what just happened. There is now a strong desire not to lose the profit already made and not to get stopped out again. So perhaps the new stop is placed extremely close, or perhaps the trader waits, hoping price will move far enough now to place the stop at break even. Price fluctuates normally. The trader gets stopped again. Price continues. Another re-entry, another tight stop, another exit, and something that began as an attempt to protect profit can quietly create more trading, more entries, more exits, more decisions, and often more emotional involvement. The trader may not have intended to overtrade at all. In fact, the original intention may have been exactly the opposite. Don't lose money, don't give back profit. But trying to eliminate every small amount of risk can sometimes interfere. With the larger trade the trader was trying to capture, perhaps protecting profit, isn't always about keeping the stop as close as possible. Sometimes, it's about giving a well-planned trade the room its management process requires. Chapter 2. A re-entry is a new trade. This is where the distinction becomes important. Once a position is closed, that trade is finished. Whether it was profitable, whether it lost, whether the stop was hit by only a few points, or whether price immediately continued afterward, the position is gone. A re-entry creates something new, a new position. And a new position requires a new decision. Does a valid setup exist now? Where is the entry? Where does the trade become invalid? Where does the stop belong? How much risk does the new trade require? How will the position be managed? Those questions should be answered according to the trade that exists now, not according to the frustration of what happened 5 minutes ago, and not according to the profit that was made earlier. That's why perhaps one of the most important principles of re-entry is this. A re-entry should be managed according to the new trade, not according to what happened on the previous one. If the previous stop was hit by a wick, that doesn't automatically mean the next trade deserves a wider stop. If the previous trade made a large profit, that doesn't automatically mean the next trade deserves an unusually tight stop. And if the previous position was stopped out just before price continued, that doesn't automatically make the next entry valid. The new trade still has to qualify on its own, because when the previous trade determines how the next trade is managed, the trader may no longer be responding to the trade in front of them. They're responding to the experience behind them. Chapter 3. The previous trade can follow the trader into the next one. Every trade leaves an experience behind. Sometimes relief, sometimes excitement, sometimes frustration, sometimes regret. And those emotions don't necessarily disappear when the position closes. Imagine a trader getting stopped out and immediately watching price reverse back in the original direction. The trader thinks, "I knew I was right." Now another entry appears, but the memory of the previous stop comes with it. The trader may think, "I'm not getting stopped out like that again." So the next stop gets wider, not necessarily because the new setup requires more room, but because the previous stop hurt. Or imagine the opposite. The previous trade made a significant profit. The trader re-enters, but now thinks, "I don't want to give any of that profit back." So the new stop becomes extremely tight. Again, not necessarily because the new trade requires a tight stop, but because the previous profit has changed how risk feels. In both cases, the previous trade is quietly managing the new one. One experience says, "Give it more room." Another says, "Don't give it any room." But neither question begins with, "What does this trade require?" And perhaps that's the question. That needs to come first. A new trade doesn't know that the previous trade was frustrating. It doesn't know that the trader already made money today. It doesn't know that the trader was just wicked out. The market is simply doing what the market is doing now, so perhaps the trader has to do the same. Return to the setup, return to the risk, return to the process, and allow the new trade to stand on its own. Chapter 4. Break-even has to be earned. Break-even can feel like one of the safest places for a stop. Once the stop reaches the entry, the trader may feel relief. The trade can no longer become a normal losing trade. But there is an important difference between moving to break-even, because the management process calls for it, and moving to break-even because the trader doesn't want to lose. This becomes especially important after a profitable trade. The trader has already made money. A re-entry appears. The trader wants to participate if the move continues. But at the same time, there is a strong desire not to give any of the previous profit back. So the trader enters with an expectation. As soon as this moves a little in my favor, I'll get the stop to break even. But the market doesn't know that the trader wants a risk-free position. A new trade may need room for normal price movement. A candle can move in both directions before continuing. a wick can form, a pullback can occur, and if break-even is forced too early, the trader may repeatedly remove themselves from a trade that was never actually invalidated. Then something interesting happens. Break-even, which was intended to reduce risk, can create another cycle. Stopped out. Re-enter, move to break-even. Stopped out. Re-enter, try again. The risk of each individual trade may appear small, but the trader is creating more decisions, more entries, and more opportunities for emotion to enter the process. Perhaps break-even isn't something a trader can simply demand from the market. Break-even has to be earned. Price first has to move far enough for the predefined management process to justify protecting the position there. Until then, the new trade has risk, and that leads to a difficult but important question. If the correct stop for the new trade requires more risk than the trader is willing to accept, is the solution to enter anyway and hope to reach break-even quickly? Or perhaps the cleaner decision is simply not to take the re-entry, because a trader doesn't have to accept every opportunity that appears. And if a new trade is worth taking, perhaps it should also be worth taking with the proper risk that the trade requires. Chapter 5. When tight stops become wide stops. There is another interesting pattern that can happen after repeated re-entries. At first, the trader may be managing risk too tightly. The stop moves to break even quickly. Normal price movement takes the trader out. The trader re-enters. Another tight stop. Another exit. Then price continues again. After this happens several times, frustration begins to build. The trader starts thinking, every time I place the stop there, the market takes me out, and then keeps going. So, on the next re-entry, something changes. The trader decides, this time I'm going to give it more room. The stop is placed farther away, or perhaps the trader waits before placing the stop at all. The reasoning feels understandable. The trader doesn't want to be taken out by another normal wick, but eventually, one of those pullbacks isn't another wick, it isn't another temporary fluctuation before continuation. The move is actually ending. The trend may be changing, and this time, the stop that was supposed to protect the trader isn't where the original process said it should be. The trader waits. Maybe price will come back. Maybe this is another sweep. Maybe the move isn't really over. But the loss continues growing. This creates an interesting contradiction. The trader began by trying not to lose. Stops were too tight because every small amount of profit felt worth protecting. But after being stopped repeatedly, the trader can eventually move to the opposite extreme. Now the stop becomes too wide because getting stopped again feels unacceptable, too tight, then too wide. They look like opposite behaviors, but perhaps they come from the same underlying problem. The previous experience is changing the management of the current trade. The first stop says, don't give back profit. The next one says, don't get wicked out again. And somewhere between the two, the original management process quietly disappears. Chapter 6. One trade can become too many decisions. There is another cost to repeated re-entry, and it isn't only money, it's decision-making. One well-defined trade might require an entry, a stop, a management process, and an exit. But once the trader begins repeatedly exiting and re-entering, the entire decision process begins again. Is this still a valid setup? Should the trader re-enter now? Where should the new stop go? Should it move to break even? Was that just a wick? Should another entry be taken? Is the move still continuing, or is it finally ending? Every new position creates another set of decisions, and every decision creates another opportunity for emotion to influence the answer. This is why one good trade can quietly become a series of re-entries, not necessarily because the trader planned to trade more. Sometimes the trader was simply trying to protect the original profit. But now, instead of managing one position, the trader is repeatedly deciding how to get back into the same move. And with every re-entry, the trader may become more emotionally involved. The first trade may have been calm. The second carries frustration from being stopped out. The third carries urgency because price is moving without the trader. Another may carry fear of giving back the day's profit. And eventually, the trader isn't only trading the market in front of them, they're trading everything that happened during the previous positions. Perhaps that's one of the hidden costs of unnecessary re-entry. More trades can mean more emotional history being carried into the next decision. Chapter 7. Protecting profit can sometimes cost profit. There is a paradox inside all of this. The trader tightens the stop because the goal is to protect profit. That sounds responsible, but sometimes protecting profit too aggressively can interfere with the process. That created the profit in the first place. A directional move rarely travels in a perfectly straight line. Candles fluctuate, wicks form, price pulls back. And if the stop doesn't allow the amount of movement the trading process was designed to tolerate, the trader may repeatedly lose the position, even while the larger idea remains intact. Then the trader has to re-enter, again and again, each time paying the cost of getting back into a move the trader was already positioned for. And by the end, something strange can happen. The trader correctly identified the directional move the market traveled in the expected direction, and yet the trader captured very little of it, not because the analysis was wrong, but because the trader wasn't able to remain in the trade. This doesn't mean a trader should never protect profit. And it certainly doesn't mean a stop should simply be left far away without a reason. It means there is a trade-off. A tighter stop protects more open profit, but increases the possibility of being removed by normal price movement. More room allows the trade to fluctuate, but requires the trader to accept some potential giveback. There is no stop management method that completely removes that trade-off. The question becomes, which trade-off belongs to the trader's system? And perhaps that's something that should be decided before the trade is moving. Not when the open profit has already become difficult to give back. Because once the amount of unrealized profit starts determining the stop, the trader may no longer be following the original management process. The trader may simply be managing the discomfort of watching profit fluctuate. Chapter 8. Let each trade stand on its own. So what can a trader do when another opportunity appears? Perhaps the answer is surprisingly simple. Treat it as a new trade. Before re-entering, return to the same questions that would be asked if the previous trade had never happened. Does a valid setup exist right now? Where is the proper entry? Where does this trade become invalid? Where does the stop belong? Is that amount of risk acceptable? How will the trade be managed? If those questions have clear answers, then perhaps the re-entry is valid and the trader can execute it according to the process. But if the proper stop feels unacceptable because too much of today's profit could be given back, that is also information. Perhaps the answer isn't to enter and then force the stop to break even. Perhaps the answer is not to take the trade. Sometimes the trader knows the move may already be mature. The trader may even be thinking, I'll enter one more time and get out quickly if the move starts reversing. But an intention to exit quickly is not a substitute for a stop. If this is a new position, it requires new risk. And if the trader isn't willing to accept the proper stop at this stage of the move, perhaps that's the answer. The trade shouldn't be taken. Not because the move cannot continue, but because the trader isn't willing to accept the risk required to participate in it. And if the proper stop feels too close because the trader was just wicked out, the answer isn't automatically to widen it. The new stop should still belong to the new trade. This is where a mechanical process can become especially valuable. The trader doesn't have to ask, how do I avoid what happened last time? The question becomes, what does this trade require? And once that answer has been defined, the trader's job becomes simpler. Execute it. If the trade works, follow the management process. If the trade fails, accept the predefined stop. If another valid setup appears, evaluate it as another new trade. The previous position doesn't get to rewrite the rules of the next one. Final thoughts. Re-entering isn't necessarily a mistake. Sometimes a valid opportunity appears again. A trader may get stopped, a new setup develops, and another entry makes perfect sense. The important question isn't simply, should the trader re-enter? Perhaps the more important question is the trader entering a new trade or still emotionally managing the previous one? Because once the previous trade is finished, its frustration, its profit, its stop out, and the fact that price continued without the trader shouldn't determine how the next position is managed. A re-entry is a new trade. It requires its own setup, its own entry, its own risk, its own stop, and its own management. Perhaps that's also why one well-defined process can be so valuable. It gives the trader something stable to return to after every outcome, and not what happened on the last trade, but what does my process require now? Because the market in front of the trader is new, the position is new, and the decision should be new too. A re-entry should be managed according to the new trade, not according to what happened on the previous one. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more videos on trading psychology and trading mindset. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever noticed a previous trade influencing how you manage the next one? And if you know another trader who might find this perspective helpful, feel free to share this video with them. And until next time, keep learning, not just about the markets, but about the trader you're becoming.